understand you may have to leave, but if you mind leaving your phone number with my associate here, Carrie.
It's fine. I just want us to be able to go to Bishop. I just go to Bishop and just, so we'll pay for the gas, but I think they should pay for the gas now because they're gouging us with our bill. $270 gas bill and it's normally $40.
Any questions regarding?
I'm sorry, I've had it. I'm so glad he started speaking up and he started because I feel like I'm in a whole different, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone.
Yeah, the numbers you show on your boards and your measurements have nothing to do with what's going on with this community, in case you haven't figured that one out.
Yeah.
Well,
Nothing.
What we presented were the complaints that people gave to us. So people actually called our office and said, these are the complaints I'm having, and wanted to have your questions answered. So
I have a
I will
recommendation.
be the first to say that our numbers in our analysis don't necessarily speak for the entire community. It is for the people who called us. So when it comes to the aftermath of this situation, when the well is sealed, when we get to that point where the state has confirmed that the emissions are going down, we do expect these emissions to plummet quite significantly, and people will be able to safely reoccupy their homes. But that being said, as I mentioned before, we want to institute a system where we can monitor what's going on. We don't just want to put you there and say, all done. We want to continue to monitor the air. We want to continue to monitor health. If anything changes during that time, if we notice that there is something unpredictable that is going on, things are elevating again, symptoms are getting worse, gases are elevating again, we fully reserve our rights as a health department to go ahead and reinstitute that directive and say, let's get people out again. I'm not saying that that's what we want to have happen, but we reserve those rights to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the health of the community. So we're going to be with you as this whole process continues.
So one last quick question. Besides radon, what other radiation measurements have been done by whom?
Radon's the only one that we look for because we know that that is the kind of thing that can be liberated during the excavation of something like the well that was being excavated up the facility. So that's the only one we really had concern over, and that's what we look for.
Thank you.
Two questions. First one is, could you explain to me exactly what that 1.0 part per billion health protective level means and where it comes from? Because you keep throwing that number out there and I don't really get it.
Sure, yeah, so there's a lot of extra information on the slides that I didn't go over because of interest of time. So where that comes from, there is, at the level of the state, there's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. So that is essentially a health group at the state level that's part of California EPA that makes these kinds of determinations. So they set these kinds of levels for air, for water, for anything that people may be exposed to. So when they look at a compound like benzene, and they say this is the level that we designate as our chronic exposure threshold, what that means is, if you are exposed to benzene levels below that 1.0 for your entire life, then there should be no expectation of any increased risk of chronic disease or cancer. If you are exposed to levels above that, there is some possible risk, depending on how high it is and for how long you're exposed. But if you remain below that, you can feel confident that you're not going to experience those.
And then my next question is, has there been any other methane gas leak you guys are comparing to in the world ever before for the last 3.5 months with the level that's coming out of there? And then just a personal note, I have headaches, I get migraines, but I've woken up every single day the last 3 months with a headache. I've got a son who's really sick, I've got a stepson who's never had headaches and he's missed like 5 days from school. So numbers and symptoms have to be matched up, and that's just my personal thought.
So when it comes to other methane leaks, no, I mean, I certainly haven't experienced anything like this in terms of a methane leak. But what I can point you to is that there is an experience that occurred in Alabama a couple of years ago, where it was actually a storage facility for those sulfur compounds. So it's called a mercaptan storage facility. It was struck by lightning, and then what happened was those compounds started moving their way into the community. And so for a full 6 months, the community was exposed to these high levels of these mercaptan chemicals. And no one was relocated there. Everyone stayed where they were. And not only did all those mercaptans flow into the community, they flowed in at levels that were approximately 280 parts per billion. Now, as I mentioned before, we're not even detecting the actual mercaptan levels in these situations. They're actually below 1 part per billion, which is our limit of detection. But over there, it was 280 billion parts per billion. So levels that were at least 200 or more times what we're seeing here, and for a full 6 months. What did those folks get? They got the same range of symptoms that I showed you there. So they had the headaches, the nausea, the dizziness, lightheadedness, all the same kinds of symptoms that all occurred for that period of time. And when the leak was finally stopped, then those symptoms started to go away. So there is that expectation that these symptoms will go away once we get the leak capped, and once it's been confirmed, and once we watch these air levels return to baseline levels, we have a full expectation that we're going to see those symptoms go away too.
We'll go first next to you and then to you, sir.
Okay, my name is Prnc Meet. We wanted to talk to you guys and ask you guys. I already have my shot because I cannot breathe since November. Well, I cannot breathe well. Now, what concerns me right now is that I have 4 little young kids in my family. From the last 2 weeks, they were having the same problem. Now, the diagnosis that they have, and I think it's wrong, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but they're saying that they have pneumonia. I mean, they never had that problem before. Do you think that doctors in the area don't have giving them one to people
Yeah,
around?
I mean, it's difficult for me to comment specifically on those cases, but what I can tell you about pneumonia and this time of year is that it's an extraordinarily common disease that happens at this time of year, and it comes from infection, viruses, bacteria. So if that is the case that's going on, I don't know about these specific situations here, if you have an infection like that, I can already tell you unrelated to the gas leak, because the gas leak isn't going to give you bacteria infections or virus infections in your lung. What it can do, on the other hand, is it can give you irritation. Irritation in your nose, irritation in your throat, irritation in your eyes. And those are the kinds of things that can make things a little bit worse for you in terms of your susceptibility to things like bacteria and
And another
viruses.
thing about the hours, that you say, I don't live in this area, I live in Michigan. And believe it or not, I didn't have this problem before, like I said before. Okay, since November 12th, when I went to the hospital, I started having this short breath that I have. Coughing and headaches and nausea. And I don't even smell that, the doc's over there. But I can feel it. I can feel that. Even though I close my windows and everything, but when I go out, that's the problem when I start. So I have to put it's not only in this area, it's around the area too. I live like 10 miles from here. And it's still, I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, so it's, like I said, because a lot of these symptoms are not very specific to the chemicals that we're talking about, there's a kinds of symptoms that you can get from a lot of different reasons. There are 206 different reasons why you might have a cough or a headache or anything like that.
Everybody gets sick
But-
of that.
Sure, no, I agree. So my analysis there is, in general, if you're smelling the odors and you're having those symptoms at the same time, and especially if they tend to go away when you leave the area, that fits the bill in terms of whether or not the gas leak is causing those kinds of symptoms. But if you're having those symptoms and you're not smelling the odor and you go to different locations and you're still having those symptoms, that would actually decrease the possibility that it's coming from the gas leak, and you have another medical
When I
reason
go
for
to
your
work,
symptoms.
I mean, it's okay.
Sir, and then
Yes, on the benzene chart, both AQMD and the Southern California Gas Company average has been above 1. So when you say,
Yeah,
when
no.
you say it's above 1,
Oh, yeah, no, the averages were not above 1. The range, in other words, the peak level reached over 1. But when you
No,
take all those
it-
numbers together and average them, they
you
were
put
still
up
below
a
1.
chart, the last 2 items on the chart,
Right.
one is AQMD and the other one is Southern California Gas Company, both average above 1.
No, those are still actually below 1. The peaks went above 1.
I'm
So in
not
other words,
talking
the
about,
highest
I'm
levels
not
went above.
talking about the peaks, I'm talking about the average.
Yeah, no, the averages were below 1. We can go back to the slide if you like.
Do it.
but, yeah.
Please, do it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while he's getting that up, it's our understanding there are 2 things that require us to move back into a house. Number 1 is when the well is sealed, and that's DOGA is going to handle that from a state level. The second thing, and is it safe to go back from a health standpoint? Is it going to be the county health department or the state health department that's going to determine it's safe from a health standpoint?
So what the question was regarding moving back and being able to safely move back home, and who makes those determinations. So as you mentioned, Dogger will be the one who confirms whether or not the well has been fully sealed, and they
Right.
make that geologic determination. But again, as I mentioned, that's step one for us. And so what we're going to plan to do is we're going to continue to keep the same air monitoring program that we have in place right now.
I'm not asking
Continue
about
to look
that.
at
I'm not
In
asking
addition to
about
that,
that.
no, I'm saying, in addition to that, we're going to be monitoring people's health. So as people go home, that we're going to be monitoring health to make sure that things are staying in a normal range.
That's not my question. My
Yeah.
question is it safe to move back into our houses? Say 3,000 families.
Right.
Is it safe? Not it's safe for Joe Blow over here, but it's unsafe for this
Sure,
person.
let me put that in perspective. If you want to go home right now, you can go home right now.
And it's safe.
It's safe if you're not having symptoms.
Okay.
Right? So that's the bottom line, because we still have thousands of folks who are living there right now, who never moved out. So we never said that the air is unsafe, people shouldn't be here. What we said was that if people are experiencing symptoms and find it unbearable to stay in their homes, they should have an avenue for relief. Anyone can come back at any time. And a lot of people have come back. They have come back to their homes and say, you know what, I'm back here and I just came back to get some clothes, but I don't smell anything, so I'm going to go ahead and move back
So
home. So that has
based
happened.
on what you're saying, I know you can't talk for the gas company, but it seems to me the gas companies say, okay, once Dogger says it's sealed, that's it. We're through paying for hotel rooms.
I think there's a process, and we're trying to get that process through the PRCAC. From what we understand, it's the leak being sealed, it certifies being sealed, then they have to wait a period of time, I think it's 24 hours, to make sure the seal, and then ARB's gonna have to do some flyovers and test the air, so they're gonna do some air quality testing. After all that testing is done is when Dogger will certify. I do not think they have any jurisdiction,
Right.
correct?
Over what Dogger's going to say? No.
No, not
Over
Dogger.
the Dogger's determination of the leak being fixed. Is that
Correct,
correct?
that's their
Right.
responsibility.
So just so that, I want to be really clear, nothing that they would say has any bearing. Whether that's
Right.
right or wrong, it doesn't determine what's going to happen through these processes. So we're trying to find out what those processes are
Right.
to make sure we fully understand how the air is getting tested, so that that's when they determine what the Dogger will say it, and from that time the clock starts.
Yeah, regardless of whether any health
Regardless of-
department says it's safe or unsafe, it's regardless, yeah.
Yeah.
No, not that
Just to
chart.
mention on that point too, I mean, we've been conducting in coordination with the state and also with Dogger, some on-site inspections, and we expect parts of that will continue. And that may affect parts of their decision on whether it's
Jason, can you?
That's not the chart.
Yeah, so now going back to the original question, though, to the one
No.
particularly in the benzene. One, unfortunately, it's not very clear on this graph, but one is actually this bar up here. So this is the 1 part per billion benzene at this line. So the averages are clearly below that 1 part per billion.
That's not the
but
chart
that's
I'm
different.
referring to.
Okay.
I'm referring to the county health department
Oh,
chart.
okay.
I have a question on that. So what you're saying on that graph is that it's safer, I shouldn't be getting these symptoms living in Porter Ranch, but if I move to Burbank, I'm gonna have worse symptoms? And that's what that graph is telling me.
So remember, this is just for one compound. This is for benzene. So benzene is a long-term carcinogen. It is not one of the compounds that is going to cause an acute effect, such as nausea, headaches, etc. So this graph is specific for long-term measurements, and these are 24-hour integrated samples. These are not some of the samples that I mentioned before that are grab samples, ones that are near the well. They're not ones that are triggered based upon enhanced concentrations. These are basically a 24-hour representative sample of what the community would be breathing, at least here. Now, with regards to Burbank and central Los Angeles, benzene is a known pollutant emitted from other sources, automobiles, solvents, paints, etc. So in these type of areas, there may be higher levels of those than you would expect in a community that's near a canyon. So that is probably reflective of what we're seeing there. Again, this is specific to benzene. There are other chemical components, again, such as methane, that you would be exposed to, that you would have those reactions to.
Okay, let's go ahead and take another few questions.
Thank you. As a board member, and I'm the president of the Renaissance HOA across the street, we have 412 homeowners there, and I have to answer to them. Our properties are contaminated. Our grounds are, we have a sulfate or a sulfur white spread across our community. It's on the residents, it's on our concrete. It doesn't affect the newly slurried coat that I just put all over the community. I need to answer them. So before we move back into the community, what precautionary measures do we need to take? Some people are going to wash down their houses. Some people are going to wash down the inside of their walls. Some people are going to have their carpets done. They're going to have their drapes done. What do we need to do to let people be safe in the community?
So yeah, so if you pick up our fact sheet over here, we have a lot of information to address many of those issues. One of those issues I do want to just point out, which is in that fact sheet, is I know a lot of people have heard about the oily mist that came from the facility and rained down a lot of droplets of these substances that landed on furniture and landed on our cars and areas like that. So that was something that happened a little bit earlier in the course of this whole process.
Sure, when you were putting
and
the
gas
benzene
company
in.
has said that if you have any of those substances on your property, that they will dispatch someone to your house to come clean it. So that will be part of their protocol to come clean.
But back to what I'm saying, do the homeowners have to take such precautionary measures to move back in? Do they need to worry about what's inside their house versus what's on the outside of their house?
Right. Now, in general, no. I mean, even if you have those oily droplets or any other kind of substances that are kind of there, in general, no. There's nothing to be worried about as long as you're not, putting your hands in them and touching them. You could cause irritation, etc. If that were to be the case, have the gas company come out and do those cleanings just to make sure that it is you spick and span from their standpoint, so that you don't have to worry about cleaning it yourself. But in terms of whether it's a hazard to move back in, no. As long as you're not touching it and you're not eating it, then I don't have a problem from a medical toxicology standpoint about being around the substances.
What about people's ventilation systems?
Great question. So it's always possible that, especially if you moved away from your home and it's been locked up and you haven't, opened a door or windows since this entire time, you may open up that door or windows as soon as you get home, and it's possible some of those sulfur odors could come out of your home. You may smell it right away. Just simply ventilating your house for a period of time, maybe a few hours, is likely all that is necessary in these situations to make sure that that smell goes away. And we have that anecdotal sort of evidence from a number of homeowners who've already come back and done exactly that.
So the residue that's residing within their properties, they don't have to worry about it?
You don't have to worry about it as long as you're not touching it or eating it. So just make sure that you stay away from it. But, certainly call the gas company. They will dispatch someone to your house.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Go ahead.
I had a question for Mrs. Snyder from the Prnc. I just wondered, because we have a lot of times when we call the odor complaint line, and it took a long time for people to get out there, or they come out there and then they pretty much say we're lying. We don't smell it, we don't smell it. They said it a lot. So we got very frustrated by that. Is there anything in the works to make them come closer to us so they can get here faster?
Well, in fact, I'm sorry that you've had that experience, and I would hope that none of the folks on our staff have said anything about your lying to them, because they don't.
So many words, but they just
Because
said we don't smell a thing.
because they're interested in coming out and talking with you to find out what your experience is. One of the reasons that they want to confirm whether there's an odor happening at that point in time or not is that one of the pieces of evidence that we use to establish a public nuisance requires that our inspectors confirm in the presence of a complainant whether an odor is ongoing. And so that enables them to either use this information as part of the public nuisance case, but all the information that they gather from you is very helpful to us, because if they're at a particular place at a given time and they know the wind speed and direction and they don't detect odors at that point, and granted people have different odor detection sensitivities, but if they don't detect an odor at that point, that's information that's also helpful to us in terms of helping to establish patterns of where odors may be occurring or may not be occurring. So it's all kind of a larger part of the process. With respect to response time, I appreciate the fact that we've, as I mentioned before, we've gotten a lot of complaints. We'd like to be able to visit with everyone that we possibly can. We do have, I think we've deployed better than 30 air quality inspectors total out to this area. And a couple of them in particular, I would say probably 5 or 6, have handled a very, very large number of complaints. We have staff that are actually deployed in this area. Not, as a matter of fact, relatively few of our inspectors actually operate out of our Diamond Bar headquarters. We have sectored inspectors who are assigned to regions throughout our 4-county jurisdiction, and who are here primarily because they need to be at the ready when they receive complaints. But as you can imagine, if we're receiving a lot of complaints, it may take a little while for everyone to be able to be reached. And we're trying to see what we can do to augment our complaint response. But if you've got any concerns or questions about the program, you're certainly welcome to give me a call. I'm happy to leave you a card this evening. And the other thing is, if you know my name, Snyder, Sheriff Snyder, you can also, if you call the Cut Smog line, you can ask to speak with me. And I'm happy to address your concerns about that.
I mean, maybe I was doing it wrong. Am I supposed to call every 30 minutes, or is this just one call and then wait for a call back?
You probably don't need to call us every 30 minutes if it's ongoing. As long as you let us know that it's ongoing, that's helpful information to us. In some cases, the inspector may call you back and find out if you're experiencing the odor at that time, because that may help to prioritize. If you're not at that particular moment, but maybe somebody else who's also complained is, then we may actually go to the area where the odor is being reported to give us an opportunity to confirm it. You don't need to call us every 5 minutes. I think once you've called us about an odor incident, then certainly we'll try to respond. But we do encourage you to call. If you experience an odor, detect an odor on one day, and you detect it on the next day and the next day, give us a call. Let us know, and we're happy to come out and investigate. Okay?
Matt's got one more question, and then we're going to cut it off. I just thank you guys.
Thank you, Sharon. Then after the last question, the supervisor Antonovich's representative Jared wanted to make some closing comments.
So just one thing, if you guys, really, it's more like a general comment. I'll mention the Flint thing only because over there, the powers that be for months told the people over here that everything's fine. We saw how that worked out. So there is such a disconnect between all your testing, and you're testing for some things, and you're not testing for everything. There's such a disconnect between that and what's going on with the human beings that actually have to live here and breathe here. You really should consider, what are you missing? Put on your thinking caps and get some more thinking caps from around the planet and figure out, what are you missing?
Jared?
There's one comment. My closing comment is in regards to the 30-day relocation period that the Board of Supervisors voted on yesterday. There's no easier way for me to put it than this, and that is, in essence, what the board did yesterday was vote in opposition to the city's negotiated court order regarding the 8 days, 7 nights. Upon information received by public health, they felt that there was more long-term studying that needed to take place with some of the new information coming in before they could provide the proper assurances that the community should feel comfortable going back into their homes. Upon that information the board received, they felt that the 30-day, upon recommendation from staff, that the 30-day window to come back to your homes after it's identified by doctor that the cap has been leaked is the appropriate timeline. That's what the board did yesterday. Right now, what the county's doing, our county council, which is our version of the city attorney, is working with the health department to determine what the county's authority is in regards to this. How does our county authority match up in regards to the court order? I think that's the one comment